they don't have that semi-elite player at one of the big spots. They're all, I'm sorry, they're all exceedingly average.
All right, let's wrap up with the Washington Wizards, Mort, who just completely overhauled their roster this offseason, trading Russell Westbrook for basically every supporting cast member of the Los Angeles Lakers, bringing in Spencer Dinwiddie and Aaron Holiday as well to shore up that point guard spot. Let's start with Dinwiddie, Mort. How do you see him fitting next to Bradley Beal?
Theoretically, a solid match. He's a guy who loves to take it to the basket. He generates a lot of free throws. So does Beal, but Beal is also a little bit more perimeter oriented. So I think those two can kind of piggyback off one another. It also helps that Spencer Dinwiddie isn't Ben Simmons out there from a three-point perspective. Like he isn't a great three-point shooter by any stretch, but he will take them, and he does make just enough that defenses are aware of him as a shooter. So there isn't really one major offensive flaw. Both of them have great size as well. So you aren't really stuck with a very small backcourt partner for either one of them. Defensively, they're both sort of average here and there. Like Beal will have moments where he's significantly below average, but then most of that time it's because he's asserting himself offensively instead, and he just doesn't have like the fatigue or the stamina to really participate defensively to the extent that he wants to. Maybe this helps. Maybe having a large guard in Spencer Dinwiddie actually makes things a little bit more easier for him defensively, allowing him to play more on that end. We'll see. I like it initially. Do I think it's flawless? No, like obviously, but there is some upside to it. It's the rest of the roster I question more so than the starting backcourt.
Interesting. Okay, so let's get into that, because I mean, I agree with you. I think Dinwiddie is going to be a nice fit next to Beal, and KCP I feel good about. KCP and Holiday as your backup point guard and shooting guard, like that is a nice solid four. You still have Raul Neto as well in case Holiday goes down or whatever. So like good depth there. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this offseason already, but like there is just a major logjam at the 3 and the 4 for this team. Between you got the young guys in Rui and Denny, you got the Lakers imports in Kyle Kuzma, Montrezl Harrell. You've got another young guy who just drafted this year in Corey Kispert. You have Davis Bertans. So how do you find minutes for all of those guys, or are you able to find minutes for all of those guys?
So this might be a little bit controversial, but I don't care, because the thing is they need, and that's where I'm down on them.
Okay.
They don't have that semi-elite player at one of the big spots. They're all, I'm sorry, they're all exceedingly average. Like some have upside, sure. Some are decent. Like no. I realize like Rui is good. Like I'm not saying they're bad players. Rui is good. Kyle Kuzma improved. I'm not saying that, but like none of them have all-star potential at this point. Like none of them.
I was told Rui was Giannis 2.0.
The next Giannis, I know. I think we may need to pivot off of that. But like Thomas Bryant, I think was the one guy who really could develop into an all-star, but we just don't know how he's going to look after the ACL tear. I don't think it's reasonable to put all-star expectations upon him right now. Not before we've seen him for at least a year. Like, who is that big piece outside of the starting backcourt that is, the high-level performer day in and day out? Is that Rui going into year 3? Okay, I won't close the door on it, but I haven't seen enough to feel confident about that. I haven't seen enough from Kyle Kuzma to feel confident about that. Like, the rest of the team is just meh. Like, I like what Davis Bertans is doing for him. I love the way that he snakes around the floor to get three-point shots. That is objectively great. I like how Kyle Kuzma is rounding out his game. I like how Rui is basically dominant from within 8 feet of the basket just because of his sheer size, and there's a lot of potential there. But who's the star? Who is the big piece in the front court? I count 0.
If I had to pick someone, it would be Rui. Because I do think he took some big strides from year 1 to year 2.
Yeah.
But I think.
Oh, sorry to interrupt, but I will say, you just brought that up, but I think it's very important that we flesh that out and say that was not representative in the stat sheet, but it didn't matter. Like, he got better just in terms of IQ.
Yeah. And I think my concern for this team is it's similar to Charlotte to some extent, of like, how do you balance the win now, because they have every incentive, unless Bradley Beal signs an extension between now and mid-October, he's going to be a free agent. You know, he could be a free agent next offseason. So you have to go into this season. You can't be like, we're going to play all these young kids and we're not going to try to win, because Bradley Beal, you know, he might check out at that point. So they have to have the win now mindset, but at the same time, does that lead them to playing veterans like Kuzma over a young guy with arguably more upside in Denny, for instance? Like, Denny is the one in particular who I could see getting lost in the mix a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's my concern for this team, because I think, like, I mean, I have no idea. I'm assuming Rui starts, presumably at the 4.
Yeah.
I don't know who, like, does Kuzma start at the 3? Does Denny start at the 3 and you have Kuzma and Montrez off the bench?
Does it matter? You're not gonna, like, it's not gonna be like, it just feels like some of the same names are bungled together with very little variation in their games. Like, none of them really. You know,
well, it matters from like a minutes distribution perspective, if nothing else.
Remember when I said that Gordon Hayward should be traded?
Yeah.
He would make sense here.
That would actually be interesting.
Yes, it would.
Because like Davis Bertans too is the other guy where it's like, he's not going to start, and he's coming off such a mediocre year last year. But like, you know, he had COVID, and like, anyone coming off a bad year last year, I almost want to just throw out, because last season was just so weird. And, you know, a lot of guys struggled with it either on or off the court. But given the amount of depth they have at the 3 and 4 spots now, you know, having Bertans there at $16 million a year for the next 4 years doesn't make as much sense as it did when they signed him. So, yeah, I mean, like, trade Bertans and Kuzma, that's going to match contracts for Hayward. And then whatever else you need to include to incentivize Charlotte to actually do that deal. But that's interesting.
Right. Yeah,
that's a
consolidation trade that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, overall, this is much like Atlanta is due for one. Washington is very, very much primed to make some sort of consolidation trade to break up this logjam at the 3 and the 4, and hell, even you're right. We'll have to see what Thomas Bryant looks like coming back from that ACL tear. They're also super high on Daniel Gafford, who looked really good for them after he arrived at the trade deadline. So I'm assuming Gafford's going to start at the 5 for them. They have Bryant coming off the bench. Montrez can play the 5 as well, at least in the regular season. But, Montrez and Bryant are each heading into the last year of their contracts. So you kind of have to figure out, are we willing to re-sign either of these guys? Do they factor into our long-term future? It's just a lot of tricky decisions, especially with this Beal stuff hanging over their heads as well. Like, I don't think Montrezl Harrell is going to re-sign with this team unless they wildly overpay him if Bradley Beal leaves. If Bradley Beal stays, maybe that's a different story, but does he stay if Bryant is still there and he has no chance of starting over Gafford? Like, we've talked a lot about the 2022 free agent class getting progressively weaker by the minute. But, if a guy like Montrezl Harrell and Thomas Bryant, who typically would not be toward the top of any team's free agent wish list, because next year's class is starting to look so bad, those guys might actually be some of the better free agents. Yeah, they might be some of the better free agents on the market. And if you can get their bird rights, like, maybe a team is willing to trade for them now to get their bird rights, be able to pay them more than, whatever another team is able to do. Or like, maybe a team looks at them basically as a free agent acquisition where, you're trading for them now because you think you are pretty confident in your ability to re-sign them, but otherwise going to be over the cap and you wouldn't be able to actually sign them next year.
Right.
So, I mean, I want to give Washington just an ungodly amount of credit for what they did this offseason, because where they were coming off of it, they got basically pasted in the first round by the Sixers, and you're looking at that caption, you're like, oh my God, they owe Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal $70+ million each of the next 2 years. There is no way out of this thing. And now we're looking at this team and it's like, well, maybe they can get Gordon Hayward, and like they'll still have Bradley Beal and Spencer Dinwiddie, and they have so many more possibilities at their disposal than they did a few months ago, which is a testament to their front office. So I don't want to rule out any possibilities of, like, maybe they find a way to trade Montrez, trade Kuzma, trade KCP, trade Thomas Bryant, trade Davis Bertans, and turn those into more interesting pieces. And then, like, if Denny falls out of the rotation, maybe he's, maybe in a Gordon Hayward trade, like you're trading Bertans and whoever, Montrez, to shore up the 5 spot for Charlotte, and then you're also trading Denny as like the main sweetener back.
I kind of like the parameters of that deal. I mean, you can send enough young stuff to Charlotte to make it all make sense.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
Yeah.
Do you think the Wizards have done enough this offseason to convince Bradley Beal to stay beyond next season?
I mean, this was a good start. Just getting away from Russ is a good thing.
Yeah.
And pivoting towards a more deep team, even with the logjam taking into account, that is definitely solid. But no, the answer is no. I know you're higher on the Wizards than I am, admittedly. And that's not to say I'm low on them. I do get the logic of it. I just think this feels like a painting that's only half finished. So that's why I'm like, you're gushing about the front court, and I'm like, this. It's the same picture. All of these players, it's the same picture. Yeah. I just think they need something else. I mean, they need their Chicago Bulls DeMar DeRozan move, which could be Gordon Hayward. It could be someone else. I don't know. I just think they need that third piece in place, which isn't necessarily a superstar, but someone who can come in and take certain possessions away from others, and where you figure out the structure of the roster. Because like you said, right now, you're not going to get full value out of the front court. This team has a lot of talent, but you're not going to maximize it because a lot of players are playing at the same position. Why would that entice Bradley Beal to stick around? Like, knowing full well that a lot of talent is just going to waste. That's not going to do it. Like, you need to do a follow-up move. The painting isn't finished. When it is, that's when you can go to Bradley Beal and go, look, we got you a Gordon Hayward. Now we also have a Spencer Dinwiddie. There is no longer a logjam in the front court. Like, things are moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
Then you can make that argument.
Yeah, if they can find a way, and I'm sure they're going to pursue it between now and the trade deadline, but maybe they wanted to wait and not make a move before seeing how it shook out on the court, and they're kind of just going to let, like, okay, if Rui takes that step forward, or if Denny takes that step forward, and we like forces our coach's hand, and now we have to keep these guys, and like Kuzma is expendable or Montrez is expendable, or vice versa. Like, maybe Denny doesn't take that step forward and Kuzma looks like a piece worth building around, So I think they're going to have plenty of options at their disposal between now and the trade deadline. Seeing how they navigate all of that in relation to Beal in particular is going to be fascinating, because that storyline is only going to pick up more steam. The longer he doesn't sign an extension, the more it's going to be, what's going to happen 2022, Bradley?
Yeah, for sure. And also, we've talked about Terrence Ross. Like, if you could flip some of the bigger forwards for Terrence Ross and Gordon Hayward, now you're cooking. Like, now you're really in business. I mean, you could flip one of the first rounder that you got for Westbrook. Like, you could maybe flip that for Ross, for example. And
they already traded that one. They sent it to Indiana for Holiday in 31.
Oh, that's okay. See, I forgot about that. But maybe there's someone else. I don't have a full overview of their draft pick situation right now. But like, if they get those two guys in, that solves like their entire roster logjam, and it at least gives you enough talent to work with moving forward. Like a roster consisting of Dinwiddie, Beal, Terrence Ross, Gordon Hayward, Rui Hachimura, and Thomas Bryant, for example. If that's the core you want to go forward with, I'm down with that.
Yeah,
like, I would be super fascinated to see what that could turn into.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what the Wizards, what the next domino is for the Wizards, because you're right, it does feel like it's an unfinished picture at this point.
Yeah, I think it is.